to another broadcast of MindYourHealthCast.com. We are coming to you weekly, bringing you this video broadcast to enlighten and provoke you to look and find out for yourself, and to maybe challenge to live a more healthier life, because I believe if you are paying any attention at all, with a multi-trillion-dollar health bill, which I refer to as a sickness bill, because it's not treating health, it's treating sickness in this country, and with more and more people coming down with more serious chronic illnesses, I believe that it would behoove all of us to find out exactly what we need to do if we're going to be healthy in this world, because there's certainly a lot of interferences for that occurring, as I'm sure if you paid attention at all, you know. Weekly, we have been giving you information. We started out with some of the basics, and then we've expanded onto some specific subjects. Now I'm kind of going back and grouping together some of the things that we talked about and doing a tying together, or we're kind of chunking up to the bigger picture. Now, it takes a while. I realize that in the society we live in, that we are constantly confronted with medical information, pharmaceutical information on the internet. We have these programs that glorify the magic of modern medicine. Unfortunately, they don't always show you the down the road. Today, you have these symptoms, they give you something, the symptoms disappear, and you think it's all great. And then maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, you have something going on again, except maybe a little worse. You go back, you get the magic pill, and you don't feel any symptoms anymore. And then maybe several months or a year later, something a little serious, much more than, say, before, occurs. Then at some point along the way, one day with some minor symptom, you go in and find that you have a serious malignancy problem, or you're going into kidney failure, or that some other serious illness has occurred, and you think, well, gee, how could that happen? I've been so healthy. And I've had patients come in, new ones that I had not seen before, referred in, and I say, well, after I've taken a history, I say, well, how would you say your health has been then in general? Oh, I've been very healthy. And they've reported that they're on blood pressure medication, they've got some breathing medication they're taking, their heart's kind of acted up some, they are on the verge of diabetes or have developed diabetes, and they're taking medication for that, but in their mind everything is fine because they're not necessarily feeling the symptoms too much. I started out at the beginning emphasizing that symptoms are not the big problem, that the symptoms are the immune system working to correct something that is not right in your body. Now, it's very difficult, I understand, to think that if you don't feel symptoms, you don't have a problem, and that's the way we normally do think. If we don't have symptoms, we don't have a problem, and it's hard to think that maybe we have a very serious problem, but have little or no symptoms. If you keep in your mind always that the symptom is the immune function doing its job. Now, we didn't, well, I suppose we emphasize it pretty heavy, but it has to be heard often. I've found over the years, I've been pushing 40 years now in the health field, and it takes a while to grasp the bigger picture, and it takes a while to understand what's going on. One of the first things that happens is with inflammation, which we consider uncomfortable, which it is. If you have redness, heat, swelling, and pain, that's really not comfortable. But now, what is that inflammatory response? And we've gone over it many times, and hopefully it's beginning to click, come together, that all that inflammatory process is not a disease. The inflammatory process is your body working to get rid of something that is the disease. And the disease means literally not at ease. And when you're inflaming, then something is not right in your body, and your body is making an attempt to correct it. Now, I mentioned before, there's 3 things you can do when you have an inflammatory process going on. And one thing is you can leave it alone and allow the body to work through the process. Now, if your body has only recently encountered something, and generally you have been healthy over your life, then it may be intense but very short-lived. It will do its job, clear it out, and settle down. The second thing you can do is to take a suppressive agent, such as an antibiotic or a steroid or other immune suppressive substance, and it will shut down the inflammation or the inflammatory process. And of course, you're going to say, wow, I feel a whole lot better. Now, I didn't mention the 5th element, which is the body fevering on top of the redness, swelling, heat, and pain. So when you have all of that together, that immune response is rectifying something that is going on. If you've picked up a virus or if you've picked up something else in the environment that your body wants to get rid of rapidly, it will inflame and it can raise fever. Now, when I studied in Germany, the doctors over there always told us that the Americans were so suppressive of fevers in children that they did not allow their bodies to clean the things out that shouldn't be there, so that later in life they develop more serious chronic illnesses. Now, that is probably a key piece of information, that fevers are not bad. Even some of the medical doctors in recent times have said, well, maybe fever serves a good purpose and might not be so good to suppress it. And of course, there's always been this fear, which is an old doctor's tale. You know, if your temperature goes up very high, you could go into convulsions, you could have brain damage and all that. And I have to say, in my clinical experience, we've seen people go up, especially children, up to 106.5 and move through it, no convulsions, and be much better on the other side. Now, if you understand the fevering process, what it's for, it accelerates metabolism, it makes everything more fluid, like the lymph and so forth, and it's very actually detrimental to viruses. Viruses are heat labile, which means heat causes a virus to disintegrate, to break apart. And so your body having a fever accelerates your process of getting rid of the virus that you picked up somewhere along the way. I know it sounds counterintuitive to some people. It doesn't to me. In fact, it always did make sense. Natural medicine made more sense to me than regular medicine when I realized that regular medicine was not in countering the real problem and was not trying to solve the real problem, but was telling you comfort by shutting off the symptoms of your body's immune response. Now, I don't know if I can ever repeat that enough until it begins to go one day, click, click, click. Oh, and I've had people do that. They would open their mouth and have, oh. And I've even doctors who want to get into natural medicine, who are regular allopathic, traditional, whatever you want to call it, doctors, they seem to think that natural medicine is taking natural things with less adverse effects that suppress symptoms. And so very rapidly they become very disenchanted and very disgruntled with natural medicine because they couldn't suppress all the symptoms, because they didn't realize that that's not the way it works, that you're going to suppress any symptoms. What you're going to do if you use natural medicine right is you're going to enhance what the body is already trying to do. And nothing stands out more to point that principle out than homeopathic medicine. Homeopathic medicine is based on the idea that it's going to provide information and energy to help the body come back into balance regardless of which way it is. The homeopathic is the most powerful in terms of doing the deepest correction in the body by helping the body return to normal. Now, we've talked before about homeostasis. Homeostasis means the body's ability to bring itself into balance. And so by utilizing something like homeopathy, you will, no matter which way it's off. And that is the other thing that has befuddled regular medicine. When they read about certain homeopathic remedies, it'll say diarrhea and it'll also say constipation. And they say, well, that's ridiculous. It couldn't do both. It either has to help diarrhea or it has to help constipation. But the fact is that that's the polarity of homeopathic medicine, is that it's always bringing you back into balance. And now sometimes it works better on one side of the two than the other, but ultimately all the remedies that are used in homeopathic medicine have a tendency to bring you back into a balanced state. Now herbs also can do that if used homeopathically, but it's kind of a waste in the sense because you don't need that much substance. That was one of the big factors that Dr. Hahnemann got into, was the minimum effective dose. Why take a huge pile of medication to try to take care of something or help your body take care of it if you only need a very small amount? And so he spent a lot of time working out the dilutions and dosing so that you were giving the minimum effective dose, not the maximum amount of milligrams or micrograms of a substance. So in herbs, there is that borderline. We're going to do a program on pharmacy coming up soon where we're going to entertain the whole realm between natural medicine factors such as herbs and homeopathy and allopathic drugs. But what you're going to see is that actually herbs kind of are in the middle ground and can go either way. You can take enough of an herb to be fatal. You can take enough of an herb to actually make you really sick because of the herb, in other words, the adverse effects of it. Or you can take enough of it in a low dose that's beneficial and will help your body to get rid of a problem, because now you're going back to the homeopathic principle. In effect, there's two basic big principles. There's allopathic and there's homeopathic. Allopathic says we're going to create a new disease in the body more powerful than the symptoms you're experiencing, which will suppress your symptoms. Now, unfortunately, there's some effects from that that maybe are not as desirable as you'd like, and we call those side effects, which is a way of playing down very adverse major effects and therefore making it more palatable. So we're going to play that down, and we're just going to say that this will help you feel better if you have these symptoms, but you have to tolerate certain adverse effects. And those adverse effects we'll just call side effects, and we'll kind of play it down so you'll let it slip by and won't notice. And so that way, that if you buy a drug because your nose is dripping and your eyes are watering and burning, and you take it and it gets rid of that for a while, not permanently, it just turns off things in the body that are producing those symptoms, because that's part of the inflammatory process. But anyhow, if you take that drug, you're going to feel better. Your eyes aren't going to be as watery and red, and your nose not going to drip so much. But now remember, when we talk about pharmacology, you're going to find that the average drug on the market is only 40% or less effective in producing the symptom control that it was designed for. Now, what we'll do, though, is don't pay attention, because we're going to drop our voice in our ad, and we're going to say it at much lower, much more level, much less emotional. Well, when taking this drug, don't pay too much attention to the fact that you could develop a blood clot, a stroke, a cardiac arrest, or death. But your nose is not going to drip and your eyes are going to feel good. Now, if you pay attention to these ads, but I don't think people do. I think they hear, well, yeah, you're going to feel better, and they don't pay too much attention to those adverse effects. Now, those adverse effects are not just side effects. They're big-time effects. I would say blood clots, strokes, cardiac arrests, and death is probably a significant symptom. And in fact, a very significant adverse effect or side effect. So you have to drop your voice when you say that, because you don't want really people paying too much attention, that to trade off feeling better with a runny nose and burning eyes that you might be killed in the process. We don't want you to think about that too much, so we'll throw it in there because the FDA says we have to let you know about this. But we don't have to play it up like we say, wow, it's great, I can go out, I can do all these things because my nose doesn't drip anymore. Of course, it might kill you in the process, but don't pay too much attention to that. Anyhow, we're going to do pharmacology down the road, and we're going to talk about the relationship between allopathic herbs, which falls in the middle because it can go either way, and homeopathics, and I think seeing that connection will help you better understand what we're talking about. I have to be careful because I can go into this stuff so deep that maybe I don't even understand it. But we don't want you to be overwhelmed, but at the same time, I want to give you enough information so you can have a decent understanding of what we're talking about. Now, I've decided today to do something a little bit different. Occasionally we throw in about a particular person that we had worked with certain types of problems and what our, what I want to say, results, I guess is the best, were in the case. Now, some people are saying, well, what can you really do with natural medicine? Can you really help any serious problems, or is it just good for sniffles and insect bites and a little bit of sunburn and scrapes and abrasions and that type of thing, or can you really help people with serious problems? Well, I've been in the field going on 40 years, and I'm just going to lift out a few cases that I've worked with and the results. And I won't say that we didn't have ever any cases that didn't succeed, because we did. And why do we? For all kinds of reasons. One is, of course, the one that I guess bugs me the most is the fact that people don't follow the program. They don't comply. And of course, medicine has the same problem with their allopathic drugs. Many times people only take one now and then they go back and say, well, this stuff didn't work very well. I just recently heard from a patient who said that their problem was getting a little better, but it was very slow, and they wanted to renew some things to keep the program going. When I looked at the file, looked what they had, I realized that probably they only have been taking the program maybe half at the best. Now that means if you don't take it every day or the times over the day that it's designated, those are all there for a purpose. And I keep telling people they don't want to listen because they want to hunt and peck. When we put together a program, it's for the whole body, the whole person, based on what we did, readings on the electronics we do, based on the symptoms the patient has given us, based on our own observation and interrogation, and past things that have been done to the person. And all of this comes together for me to put together a program. That program is balanced for that person to move them on to the next level of health, a higher level of health, which many times has to be done in steps. When you have a chronic problem, you're not going to get rid of it overnight. There is no magic pill, there is no shot, there is no anything that's going to overnight get rid of a chronic problem. Because the tissue, depending on how chronic it is and how much the tissue has been affected and the cell function upset, it's going to take a while, step by step, to bring that back into balance. Also, you have accumulated garbage in your body over the years in layers, and sometimes a lot of that has to be removed to finally get back to the point that your body can take over and correct itself. Ultimately, that is always my goal, to get your body to take over and take care of itself. I don't want you coming back as a patient every month or every 2 months or every 6 months for the rest of your life, because I'm building my practice. I'm in the field to get people well. If it takes one treatment or one visit or 2 or 3 and that's it, that's great for me. I would much rather have you tell other people, well, I got well, than to treat you for a long period of time. I've had people come in here and I'd say, well, how long have you had this problem? Oh, well, I've been being treated for this for about 20 years. And I'm thinking in my mind, you continue to go back to those doctors and get these drugs for 20 years and you still haven't gotten rid of the problem, And I'm sometimes wonder, well, what made you think to come to me now? What's the motivation? But in any case, one of the first questions they're going to ask, well, how long is this going to take? And, this is going to take a long time. Can I get better in a week or a month? And I'm thinking, here they went to these other doctors and spent thousands of dollars over 20 years and did not get rid of the problem. But they come to me and they think, well, is there some magic in this natural medicine? Can you get me well tomorrow or next week or next month? And I'm saying, it took you a while to get there, and it's going to take a while to get it out. So the people that I've had with very serious chronic problems, we've seen get well very fast comparative-wise. Now, there used to be an old rule of thumb in naturopathic medicine that it takes 1 month for each year it took you to get where you are. It takes at least 1 month for each of those. I like to think that we can do it faster, but if you've had the problem that started 40 years ago, and that means 40 months, which is over 3 years. And I'd like to think in most cases we can get you well a lot faster than that, but only, number one, if I get all the information. Number two, if you take and comply with what we've told you and you're willing to change some aspects of your living. If you're not, then I guess then you should enjoy your misery because you're earning it if you're refusing to do something otherwise. And I've had people in death's door tell me, I'm sorry, I don't like the taste of it. I can't stand it. And they've been told they only have 2 weeks or a month or 6 months to live at the most. But they don't want to do the program because they don't like the taste of it. I have great difficulty with that. Do you really want to get well, or is your serious illness your way of exiting out of the world without being blamed for killing yourself? I don't know. But all I know is that it seems to me that it's pretty crazy that someone doesn't want to be bothered. They don't want anything with a bad taste. They can't swallow pills because it's too much trouble, or they don't like the drops because they don't like the taste of them, or whatever, or they're a pain to take. But yet I hear the people have suffered, or sometimes, as I say, on death's door, but it's too much trouble. So, if the person isn't motivated to get well, then there's probably not a thing I can do, because I cannot change their attitude if that's where they're set. I've said before, the one thing that's incurable are attitudes. And if people have a bad attitude, or if they want to check out of life and they're going to use their illness as a means to do it, and at the same time let on to other people that they're doing everything they can, but no doctor can help them. I know I had one lady came in and says, you are the 100th doctor I've been to, and as soon as she left the office, I said, she'll tell the next doctor that he's the 101st doctor she's been to, because she's not going to follow anything. And she didn't, of course. She never came back. So what does that tell me? My suspicion is two things. They're either totally deluding themselves that there's some magic pill out there that overnight's going to take care of everything, or number two, they really don't want to get well, that they are getting too much gain out of their illness. Now, a lot of people get a lot of attention for their illness, and psychologically, I have known of people actually saying, I wouldn't mind if I never got well because I never got a lot of attention from anybody before, and now I get a lot of attention, so if I could just stay this way, it would be great. And I've actually had people tell me that. So they didn't tell their mate that, but they told me that, and of course I was bound not to tell their mate unless they gave permission, but I've had them say, everything's fine the way it is. The husband has been taking me every place to try to get well, but underneath, I don't want to get well. I enjoy the relationship as it is, and I really don't want to, and they declined all kinds of things that could help them, and I've seen that happen. So I'm just throwing that in to kind of let you know that if there isn't results, it's not always the therapy, it's the person's compliance or desire to get well. So, with that in mind, let's talk about a few of the cases that I've seen that will emphasize what really can you do with natural medicine. In fact, that's what I was calling this, some examples of natural healing. Just here's some that I personally worked with. I'm not even putting them in any time frame because some of these start way back in my early days of getting into it, and some are up to more recent. But these were just some that came to mind where the person looked like they either weren't going to make it or that they just had a terrible problem that was not responding. Okay, the first one that came to mind when I started thinking about it was I had a lady, she was probably in her late 50s, and she had started out as a young girl, learning to ride a horse, and later started teaching people how to ride. She had evidently a natural inclination to it, and so she taught riding, and later at some point she actually opened her own riding academy, and she did so well at it that she invested her money otherwise. And so anyhow, by the time I met her, she was an astute business lady who owned some high-rise hotels and all kinds of businesses and was pretty wealthy. However, she had one little problem. She had developed an illness that at this point that I had seen her, she was non-functional at all. She had to lay around most of the time, she had no energy, and her body was actually starting to fall apart. Now, her history was that 20 years previous, she had developed a hepatitis. They gave her the regular medical treatment, but she didn't really recover from it. And so as time went on, she went downhill. And as she got weaker and sicker, she had to hire someone else to come in and run her businesses. And so she was most of the time incapacitated. And finally, she ended up in Mayo Clinic. And Mayo Clinic, after running her through a couple, 3 weeks of all the tests, sat down with her and said, well, we suspect it's probably related to that old hepatitis. However, there's nothing we can do. But we do know this: you're either going to have to take prednisone as long as you live, which might not be very long by taking large doses of prednisone, as long as you live, or if you quit it, you'll die. Now that was her concluding remarks as she left the Mayo Clinic. And so she went home pondering what she should do, and one of her relatives, who had been a patient of mine, started talking with her and said, why don't you go see this guy? So she wasn't able to do it on her own, but she was flowing in and helped to the office because she hardly could walk. She came in and sat down at my table. I got all the information, and as I started working with my measurements, I noted some strange things, like her legs from the knees down, the skin was purple, and her skin in general was very, very puffy and weak, and when I would put a probe on it to read, pieces of the skin would come out. Her legs were very swollen, her whole body was swollen because of the prednisone. And anyhow, she could not make it on her own. So, when I did my measurements, I ascertained, I'm not going to go into but let's say we're talking about a chronic virus, but the chronic virus was only there because of immune weakness, because of her lifestyle, and because of other things. But bottom line is, we treated her, but I was very doubtful. That was earlier in my career, and I was not so sure. When she left the office, I said, I'm not sure she'll even be back. Because when I saw her skin coming off with the slightest amount of pressure, and just how she felt and looked in general, and what all had been done to her, I really didn't think she was going to pull through. But you know, the interesting thing is, she had tremendous determination, and that's how I guess she became a very successful business lady. She went back and she took everything exactly as I laid it out for her. She came back the next month on her own. She was not flown in by somebody else. She was able to walk in on her own, and her energy had come up and she was feeling better. By the second month she came in, her whole demeanor had changed, her skin had improved, everything about her improved. By 90 days, she was fully back in swing with her business. She was able to do everything that she had been doing before, actually had more energy than before, and was totally turned around. But there was two things about it. Number one, I believe we found the right things, getting back to causes. And number two, she was determined to follow the program to get well, which she did. And to me, it was a very good example of, no matter how far down you are, if you're really determined to get well and if you get the right therapy. Now, I know that she had been treated by regular medicine for all those 20 years, and all the treatments that she had received, such as prednisone, are management treatments. It's not aimed at finding the cause. It's not aimed at directing something to correct the cause or causes. Many times it's not one single thing. It's a progression of things over time. Anyhow, she did totally recovered, and she didn't have to keep coming back for the rest of her life. And I did tell her how she should eat properly and some supplementation she should continue on, since the soil's depleted, the food's depleted, and all of these problems are out there, the stress and the electromagnetics, as we've talked about before, all this stuff we're dealing with every day. Anyhow, but she lived for many years after that. And so she was really on death's bed, door, when I saw her. She was in her deathbed on death's door. And she looked terrible, and as I say, I told my help when she went out the door, I'm not so sure we'll see her again. But she pulled through, but because she followed the program. I don't know how many times I tell people, it only works if you follow the program. You can put it under your pillow, you can set it on the bed stand beside of you, you can set it at the table next to you when you eat your meals, but if you don't get it in your body and you don't do it the way that I've told you to do it, you probably are not going to get very good results. And I just watched that so many times that I almost sound like I'm nagging, but I don't. I just say, well, here it is. And if you don't want to follow it, that's fine. I'm not going to convince you. I'm not going to argue with you. Almost all of my patients have come by referral by somebody else. I never advertised over the years. I never, other than go out originally when I first opened the doors and do some lectures about what natural medicine was. And people started coming to me with difficult problems that no one else been able to help, and they got well. They told other people. And so over the almost 40 years, that's how I got built up, was just by people telling people. And as a consequence, I have people come in from all over the world. And it's interesting how the word of mouth travels, but I've had from Israel, I've had from Africa, I've had from South America, I've had from Canada, I've had from Russia, I've had from Poland, I've had from Switzerland, you name it. I've had people from all different areas of the world, down in the Bahamas, in the British Indies, where else? Jamaica. I've just had people from all over, and it's all been by word of mouth. I know it works, and I've seen it happen, and I've seen people turned around that were told, like this lady, you either take the prednisone or you die. Well, she didn't take the prednisone anymore, and she didn't die either because she got well. So the fact is that if the people will follow, it's going to work, and if they are dedicated or determined to get well, they can. And that is a big factor, is whether you really want to get well. Okay, let's talk about another one. I think the second we'll talk about, I have several of these laid out, and I know the time always tends to get away before we really get very far. But this was an interesting one. This lady came to me referred by another patient. She had just come out of the Mayo Clinic and been told, her husband was told, that they couldn't find anything and they didn't have anything they could do. He should put her in contact with hospice. Okay, when she came into the office, she was weak, had to be helped by somebody else. She looked grayish green, her skin did. Her hair looked like it was straw. She, behind all that, was actually a very pretty lady, but at the time I saw her, she looked like she was pretty close to expiring. And we put her on a program, and again, she was one of those people who went back and followed the program. I mean, she felt terrible. She couldn't keep food down. She looked like a skeleton. I mean, everything seemed to be wrong. And this lady was only in her 40s. The other lady was probably in her late 50s that I talked about. This lady was only in her 40s. And so in the first month she came back, she looked much, much better, felt much, much better. By the second month, she was doing all kinds of things, and by 90 days, she was back in her big schedule, involved in business with her husband, traveled all over the world, actually, not just the country, but all over the world. And she was back to, and has been since then. I see her periodically, and she still is moving well, and she became a convert to natural medicine because she had gone through all the treatment of regular medicine, including Mayo Clinic, which could do nothing, only offered her a room in hospice, and she recovered, and still has today. This has been many years ago, and she's still doing well today. I wouldn't say she doesn't slip occasionally in her eating program and her diet, but I think that she has done well compared to a lot of people. You know, sometimes, and I've had people come back to me later and say, well, you know, I was feeling so good, I thought I really didn't need to do all this stuff anymore. And here they're having problems again because they only came a couple of times and they felt so good from a couple of times, they thought they were not going to need to do anything anymore. And I have to emphasize again, we don't treat symptoms. The symptoms disappear because we're correcting the body, or the body's ability to correct itself, really. Because what we remove are obstacles to your body doing its job. Your body was built to take care of itself. So if you give it the tools that it needs to take care of itself, it's going to do that. You don't have to have drugs of all kinds poured into your body. You just have to have the right stuff there. Now, unfortunately, we are subject to our environment, we're subject to stresses, we're subject to genetics that we brought in and to epigenetics from our family background. All of these things can predispose us. So certainly that's not the best thing to have happen, but nonetheless, in spite of all those, we can live a reasonably healthy life if we're paying attention and are conscientious about the four things what we mentioned way back, excuse me, was, remember, diet, water, exercise, and emotional health. Those four areas, if you give attention to those. Now, under that emotional side is going to be where that stress hits in heavy. And so if you do those four things and follow them pretty good. Now, I don't say that you never can take a step off the path for one or two times, but if you get back in the old habits that got you there, then you're going to get back there again. And of course, this lady that I just mentioned about rushed right back in because she had, after several months of being off the program, we had not really finished. I knew that, and I always tell people, you know, this is not going to be overnight. We're going to sometimes have to remove step-by-step layers that you have acquired. Remember that I've said before that your illness history is like a tape recording of your life, and if you have things happen, they get recorded and recorded and recorded, and pretty soon you have this big recording of where you are right now. When you come to see me, I start from where you are right now and start erasing that tape backward until all of that's out of your system. Now, sometimes if it's a short tape compared to others, then it doesn't take as long. Sometimes it takes longer. But in most cases, even after I quit treating you, meaning you're feeling pretty good, and you don't have to come back very often. Many times I'll say, well, you know, it's kind of going to be up to you. If you're feeling pretty good, you can go for a long time. If you want to come in periodically just to be checked, you can do that, maybe once or twice a year. But, you know, your body is going to continue, and it does. And I've had people that once we've removed those hurdles have called back in 2 or 3 years later and say, guess what, I just had a few chickenpox broke out. Now that means that I had chickenpox when I was 6 years old, so now my body is cleaning itself back to 6 years old. And that wasn't because I was giving her things to do it. It's because we had freed up the body, and once it gets freed up, it continues on its own, and that's where we want it to be. We want your body to take care of itself and have the capability of coping with the environment and all the things that there are to deal with. So we're going to take another step here and talk about another case. Now this is a quirky one, at least it was to me. because this involves a man probably in his late 60s, and I never did see him actually. Now that's why I'm saying it's quirky. This was the father-in-law of one of my patients. They called me one day on the phone and said in some other city, her father-in-law was in the hospital with blood sepsis. Now, I don't know if you know what blood sepsis is, but it means that something extremely toxic has gotten in the blood. And if it isn't something done about it, it's probably going to be fatal. Your temperature goes up, but you feel shaky and freezing. Your body is basically in shock. It's like a shock. And it's sepsis, which means something poisonous or toxic. And if you can't help the body get that out of there, then it's going to almost ultimately die. I wouldn't say no one ever recovers from it, but if you've got a full-blown case of blood sepsis, they're putting you on IV antibiotics, the strongest they've got. They're giving you prednisone. They're giving you whatever they think can help your body settle that down. So, this man had blood sepsis. They had done all of these things. They had done all the regular medical treatment. They'd given him all these things to take, and he was not responding. And so he was now on a critical list, and so the patient called me and says, do you have anything that possibly can help him? I said, well, I think so, but it may be a big problem because he's in a hospital and he's under the care of doctors, and they may not let you give him anything. They may be afraid to let you do anything. But her feeling was that they're saying he's going to die if he doesn't respond, which he's not doing. So I put together some things here. They came to my office, picked it up, and drove to the other city and asked the doctors about giving it to him. Well, at this point, they knew they didn't have anything that they could do. They'd done their big guns, and it still wasn't working. So I said, okay, give it a shot if they'll let you do it, and they did. And within 2 days, he was well and out of the hospital. Now, it's interesting because, as I say, I'm bringing up some of these cases to show you, okay, do you think maybe natural medicine can do a lot? Because we have seen some very, very difficult, severe problems. And as I say, many, many patients have been to Mayo Clinic, to Shands up in Gainesville, and Watson Clinic over in Lakeland, and some of the big centers that have a good reputation of being able to deal with difficult things. Now, of course, they deal with difficult things on a different level than I do. They deal with them on the basis of suppressing the symptoms so that people can feel better, and I deal with them on the basis of getting the person's body back in order so it can take care of itself. The symptoms disappear because we have solved the problem. And talking about the Watson Clinic, maybe I'll go ahead and throw that in at this point. I really didn't even have it written down here, but it reminded me of another case I had. This lady called me on the phone and said, I need to get in to see you. Somebody recommended me to you. I've just been to the Watson Clinic. I've gone through their program. Now, I'm not saying this is a detriment to Watson. As I say, especially in emergencies where people in bad accidents, traumas, and all that, I think the trauma medicine is very good to put people back together when they've been all broken up by accidents and so forth, or things have been left alone in your body to the point that they run downhill, and now you've got an organ or a tissue that's so destroyed that it's very difficult to turn it around. Then I'm not saying that there's not a case for surgery, and maybe even some other cases where you've been in a terrible accident, your body's full of dirt and grime from wherever the accident occurred, and maybe it is so shocked and the immune system is so down that maybe a very temporary use of antibiotics might be needed in that case. But in general, of course, I'm against the use of antibiotics and the steroids because of, in general, the way they're used today. Now, at one time when they first came out, especially steroids, they were only used in very unusual, severe cases. Now they hand them out like candy, even down to a year-old or less than a year-old children. And it's just, I've noticed that happen with all the drugs. Anyhow, getting back to this clinic. And I'm not trying to tear down medicine. I think that they've worked hard at understanding. I just don't like the choice they have made as to the therapy and the direction they've taken over the years, instead of getting people really well by restoring their bodies, to only worry about managing symptoms and make them feel good for the moment so they will be back for more treatment. And I think a lot of that goes on, especially prompted from the pharmaceutical industry. The more people they have on drugs for the rest of their life, the better it is. Anyhow, the lady called me, had been through the clinic, and she had a bad pain in her lower left groin area. Okay, she went to a local doctor's first, and of course none of them could help her. And so finally she was told, well, the Watson Clinic's a very good clinic, you should go there. So she went there. So they did 2 weeks of tests. Now this is several years ago, so the 2 weeks test then was between $30,000 and $35,000. So at the end of that time, now I'm repeating what she has told me. She said at the end of the testing, she went in and sat down with the doctor who was going to go over all the tests. And he had a stack of records a foot high of all these different tests that were taken and so forth, and all the results. So, and interestingly, later when she came to see me, she brought the whole stack. So she said, see, I wasn't lying. It's a foot high stack of tests that they did over 2 weeks for about $35,000. And so she sat down with the doctor and she said, well, what did you find out? Now, when she went in, her presenting symptom was, I have a pain in my left groin. Well, after going over all these tests, which they seemingly couldn't find anything, she said, well, what is your conclusion? He said, you have a pain in your lower left groin. And of course, at that point, she's furious. She means, after all this money and all this testing, you're telling me what I told you when I came in? What caused the pain and how do I get rid of it? We don't know. I mean, I'm not laughing at the doctors. I'm sure within what he was trained to do, he did the best he could with what he had. However, it wasn't very good for that patient. So when she came in, we tested her on the type of treatment approach I use. And within, I think, the first month she came back, and the pain was already gone. And the things that we have found, that I think her total time was 2 visits. Just to show you how fast sometimes regular medicine can work if the problem is more recent and it's not so deeply embedded over years and years. Then we can get rid of it pretty fast. Again, not by suppressing symptoms, but by correcting the cause. So to me, that was a very interesting case. And talking again about the clinics, I had a lady. This lady was only in her 20s. The one I'm just talking about, I would say she was probably around 40. This lady's in her 20s, and again, she was referred to me from Gainesville, actually. She was going to dental school, and she just started feeling terrible, so terrible that it affected her disposition, and she just felt angry and grumpy and miserable. And she was in her 3rd year of dental school, and she was married, no children. So I got this call from her husband. And he said, here's what's going on. We don't know what it is. We've been through the clinic up here with the university. They've done every test they know to do. They cannot find anything. He said, I need to find somebody different, and you come highly recommended. So we made an appointment. He brought her down. Well, when I checked her, what we found was, usually I'm not even saying what we find, but this was so unusual. We found that she had what's called a necrotic appendix. That means an appendix that is in not acute inflammation, but chronic inflammation that is disintegrating. In other words, it's on the verge of rotting. So necrotic means it's dying. So anyhow, that's what I came up with. And this means the husband is sitting there and he says, well, I hope you can help her, because if you can't find anything either, this is it. We're getting a divorce because I can't live with her like this anymore. And so I found the necrotic appendix and I said, you know, on a chronic inflammation, you don't have all the inflammatory markers that would point out an acute appendix problem. So she didn't have an acute, she had a subacute chronic appendix problem. And so gradually the appendix was disintegrating, or already to disintegrate. So I said, I don't know if we can really save it or not, but I'm going to put you on this treatment, and if suddenly you go into severe pain with a high fever, you better get to the emergency room immediately because they may have to take it out. So they agreed to that. I gave them the stuff. They came back. In this case, I think I had them back in 2 weeks. It was a shorter period of time. I usually do a month now, but I had them back in a couple weeks. Came back in. She was smiling. He was smiling. And he said, you know, the first 2 or 3 days we started taking this stuff, she really felt bad and really got bad. And we thought, uh-oh, you know, not only is it not helping, but she's going to be worse. But then she woke up one morning and felt much better. And from then on, it was uphill. I think she came back for one more visit after that. And she was feeling great. And she was looking forward to finishing her dental program. And to me, it was a very good example of finding the cause or the key factors and giving the right therapy. Now, we could have given her massive antibiotics, but, you know, it will only stop immune response, and therefore she would be worse. In other words, it probably would have killed her. So many times on that kind of a case, they don't catch the chronic appendix issue until it's post-mortem or ready for post-mortem, because once it bursts in the body cavity, you get in peritonitis, and then it gets critical very rapidly, and fever goes out of sight, and all kinds of things start happening. They start going into having chills and convulsions, you name it. It's not a pretty sight. Anyhow, fortunately, it was not so far gone, and the treatment turned it around and totally changed her disposition. So I'm saying all this to say, first of all, natural medicine is extremely powerful if you understand how it is and works, and if you can apply it properly, and if the people follow the program, you can get tremendous results with some very serious problems. As always, the biggest thing is getting compliance, especially if it tastes bad or makes them feel bad. Okay, now we have another case that we'll talk about a little bit. Here's another one that I never really saw, and I was only really the consultant on it. It was in another state, and it was kind of interesting. I was a speaker at a world conference on natural medicine in Nassau a few years ago, and while there, the wife of a doctor from up in the Carolinas was down there and had gotten very interested in natural medicine and homeopathic medicine. And so we ended up having some discussions about the whole field. And of course, she saw the lecture I did on energy medicine. And at any rate, after the conference was over, I came back and she went back up to Carolina. And about a couple weeks afterwards, I guess she was impressed with what my lecture was about and also what we had talked about as far as how I did therapy. Her husband was a doctor who was wanting to get into natural medicine and was learning about it, but was far from being, quote, competent in doing it. So she called me on a Friday afternoon, actually, late afternoon, and said, a good friend of ours who is also a patient has just developed acute pancreatitis. He's in the hospital in critical care, and they've told him if they couldn't get it settled down that it was going to be fatal. And she said, is there anything you can tell us? Because, even though we're interested in natural medicine and have been learning a little bit about it, this is way beyond anything that we can handle. Can you give us some ideas? So I gave her a list over the phone of about a half a dozen things I thought would be extremely helpful with her acute pancreatitis. She was able to get part of them that night and go to the hospital, and she called me the next morning and said, guess what, we only got part of these, we're going to get the rest today, but during the night, about 3 or 4 in the morning, his fever broke and went down, and he's feeling better, but we're going to go ahead and get the rest of this stuff and treat him. So they treated him over Saturday, and Sunday afternoon, the doctors came in and said, well, I think we're going to be able to release him on Monday or Tuesday. Now, then this lady told me, she said, there was another man that just happened to come into the hospital at almost the same time he did, also with acute pancreatitis. The medical doctors treated him over the weekend, and he died. But this man recovered and was released Monday or Tuesday and was out of there, because I had talked to her later down the road. She called back about someone else that had a problem. But just to show you, again, acute issues versus chronics, because most of these we're talking about were more chronic things, this is an acute thing. I would say homeopathic medicine is at its fastest, and herbal medicine, if used properly, they're at their fastest with acute issues. Acute issues means it's something newer that's come up. The inflammation has just come up right now to take care of it. And therefore, if you can get the right things and help the body move through it rapidly, you can. I've seen it actually in a matter of actually an hour or two, major changes on acute problems. The deeper they are in the body, the longer they've been there, depending on how severe they are, the more difficult it gets to help your body get rid of the things that have started that process so that your body can get back to taking care of itself. But with little kids especially, their bodies are not as full of junk, and therefore they're much easier to take care of. And so even adults, depending on how much medical treatment. I've had elderly patients in their 90s, 80s, that they never took all the drugs over the years. They grew up eating a good diet, and they kind of watched their diet over the years, and they never went to doctors and got drugs and never took them. So those people were very easy to clean up and correct. And also people who had been born in Europe and some of the other countries that came over here later in their life, those have been the easier to treat. But the people who have been born in the U.S. and grown up in the U.S., not on a farm and not eating good food when they were young, in our more modern times, those are the people that have terrible illnesses. And things are coming on much faster. I'd say 30 years faster each generation, the same type of problems are coming on. Right now we're having children in the 6 to 8 years old class developing type 2 diabetes, which was an old age form, which means that their body is like way down the hill real fast. And we have people having their gallbladders out, again, teenagers at 14 plus or minus. We have heart attacks in the teens with young people now, and we have strokes in the 20s. Now these are all things that used to happen to 70, 80, 90-year-old people, if at all. And now here we've got it that far down. So we really have a major problem. It's not so simple anymore. I'm just thinking what else that we can give you illustrative. I guess I can think of this one case. The lady was in her 50s. This is kind of unusual. She heard about me from someone else and came in. And her symptom was that all of her teeth from the front down the left side, all the upper teeth, were loose, and she showed me she's pushed her tongue against her teeth and they move back and forth. She said, I have been to the dentist. He told me those teeth are beyond repair. They have to be extracted. There's nothing he can do for it, or nothing that can be done for it. And she said, do you think you could help me? And I said, well, I have a suspicion that we could help. We'll give it a shot, but I feel pretty confident we can help. So we put on a program, and 90 days later, she went back into the dentist, and the teeth were all solid. He tapped on them and all of this. He said, well, I guess we can go ahead and repair them and get your dental health up to snuff. But he said, I've never seen anything like that. And I can understand why you hadn't seen anything like that, because they're not working and they're not trained to work. And see, I have to watch that people think I'm negative on doctors. I'm not. Regular doctors. There's a few of them that are unscrupulous. The same in the natural field. There's a few doctors that are unscrupulous. They're into it for money and business, and they don't care what they do. If they can talk somebody into doing it and they can make money on it, then that's great. And I'll tell you one in just a minute, an example of that. But and I don't even know the doctor. It came through a patient's how I found out about it. But anyhow, we can help the body do what it normally should do if it did not have something that inhibits it from doing that. And so our approach always is to, number one, locate the types of things that your body has accumulated that are interfering with it working right. Number two, look for deficiencies and also emotional state and so forth. Then we're going to supply the right nutrients, fatty acids, aminos, whatever it is, vitamins that might be needed. And we're going to also use homeopathics and the correct herbs, except we're going to be using the herbs homeopathically, meaning to actually help correct the problem as opposed to trying to suppress and to manage the symptom. And anyhow, with doing that, then great success. So that's why the lady was able to actually solidify the jawbone, because we found out a long time ago that osteoporosis almost always begins in the jawbone, and what everybody are told by the dentist, you got receding gums, we need to do this kind of repair and so forth, wanting to do grafts and you name it. That's not really the problem. The problem is that the bone is shrinking because of osteoporosis, so of course the gum is going to follow the bone, it's going to pull down on the teeth. And we've been able to stop that and in most cases improve it. And we've seen teeth shift back into position. I had a lady who had a gap between her two front teeth about an 1/8 inch wide. And we put her on a program, and within about 3 months, she came in one day all excited. The two teeth had moved right back together on their own. No braces, no anything. So I'm just saying that the secret is applying the right thing. And if you can do that, you're going to help a lot. I can go on and on. I just throw on a couple more, and I know the time's running, and I've promised the producer we're going to quit making these big long ones. We're going to work mostly on an hour format, or pretty close to that. We may run over a little. But just to give you a unique thing, there was a lady who has all kinds of problems. When I saw her, she was a mess. She was from another state, and in fact, she was up in the Chicago area. And what had happened is she had developed, I believe it was uterine cancer years ago. She ultimately ended up at the University of Illinois, and there was a doctor there doing some research with linear accelerators, which is a type of atom smasher. And he felt that if they bombarded the tissue, cancerous tissue with that, they could kill the cancer cells and so forth. So anyhow, it became apparent he didn't really know what he was doing, and he had no way of knowing if he was overexposing people. So she went in as one of those patients to be treated, and he literally almost burned a hole through her lower pelvic area with the intensity of the radiation that he developed using this linear accelerator. And so later, unfortunately, I'm not laughing about it, it was serious. Later, the irony of it is he himself died because he got overexposed to all the radiation from the linear accelerator, to say nothing of the people who died or were badly injured. She was one that was badly injured. She developed diabetes, and the skin on her pelvic area was kind of like leather where it had been burned by the radiation beam from the linear accelerator. So anyhow, she had diabetes, and she developed a diabetic ulcer on her left heel on the inner side, the medial side. And the hole was about the size of a 50-cent piece and looked awful. And it was so deep you could actually see the heel bone when she took the bandage off. And she, for 2 years, had been treated by every kind of doctor to try to heal this ulcer, and it would not heal, at least from what they were doing. And so she asked me if there's any chance that I might be able to do something for it. Well, I did. I gave her a treatment, something to do, and it was very inexpensive. And within a month or two, well, right at the beginning, it drew out, it was a type of poultice made from an herb. It drew out the poison, and some really ugly stuff came out of the heel. Then it started to heal, heal from the inside out, and it filled in the whole space out and leveled off, and it was done. And when she went back to the doctors who had tried to heal it before, they were astounded. They said, I've never seen anything like that. Not an ulcer of that size, that deep, be able to be healed. And it was very simple. As I say, the treatment was probably $1 or $2 each time she did it, or if that, actually probably less than that. And it didn't take a real long time for that thing to recover. And we've done it with other types of ulcers and so forth, gotten the same type of results. I think our time is again starting to run out here. I'm just looking to see. I should give you at least one of these on the heart, because we've gotten tremendous response in the heart. We have things that can get the heart going again, can help it repair itself even after a myocardial infarct. We've seen it happen, and I know it happens. And at the beginning, you know, you're never sure. And as you're learning, and I've spent all of these years on the side researching, digging from everything around the world to find ways to help. And we've been able to do that. And I'm looking for other doctors who are interested in learning to train, and I've put together a program that in about a year I can really give them enough information that they can do the same type of things that I'm talking about here. I don't know if they realize it, or if they're just not interested, if they would rather just keep doing what they're doing, and of course getting the results that they tend to get from doing what they keep doing. So this one heart one, again, was a strange deal. I got a call. The man was in the hospital. His wife called and then talked to him. And what had happened, he had had a major myocardial infarct. They put him on this drug, and he had a terrible reaction to the drug. His body swelled to double size. He's then lying in bed in the hospital, and the prognosis is he might last another week. That was the sum total. He might last a week. She went to the doctor and said, I think you ought to take him off that drug, because look what's happened to him. And he refused, and it was a big ordeal. They finally got him off the drug, which, interesting, I know what the drug is, and I know why that does that. Anyhow, they wanted to get him in. She was going to get him released from the hospital, bring him in as soon as possible. She had to help him, the wife did. He was a businessman who now was non-functional, couldn't operate his business. He came in, we measured him, we put him on a program, and within 30 days he was up and around. The rest of the swelling all left his body. He was up and around, and within 60 days he was back to work, and within 90 days he was in full swing. Again, very serious, on death's door, and was able to get turned around. I'm not laughing because he had it. It's just that it's amazing to me. And I'm going to throw this in. This particular one was not my case. It was a friend of mine's who did natural work. And it was one of those distant ones that he wasn't present there himself. This patient of his came in and said, my husband's in the hospital, has had a terrible heart attack. They've told him that he may only live 2 or 3 days or a week at the most, and that so much of his heart is damaged, there's just nothing can be done. And so she asked my friend, do you think that you might be able to help? So he told her, well, number one, I doubt they're really going to let you treat him in there. He's in intensive care, and oxygen and everything else, and they probably won't let you do anything. So he said, however, if you want to try to do something, I'm going to give you this product that you can go in and you can rub it on the bottoms of his feet during the day while you're in there, and then you're in the palm of his hands or his elbow folds, wherever you can rub it in. It was in a liquid form, and so she took it back to the hospital, and she did that for a couple of days, and lo and behold, he started to respond very rapidly, and within several days, they couldn't believe it. He came around, and all of his vital signs came up. They took him off to all the supports they had him on, and finally said, well, I guess we can release him, but I just can't believe it happened. I know he was ready to go. And the lady says, well, I'll tell you a secret. I got something from a naturopathic doctor, and I came in every day and rubbed it several times on the bottom of his feet and the soles of his feet and his hands and his elbow folds. And she said, would you be interested in knowing what I did? And he says, no, not really. And so anyhow, just to show you with very critical things what can be done. Now, as I said, I could go on and on and on, and these are just some, to give you some examples of some very different things. We've seen tumors shrink up and disappear. We've seen all kinds of things happen over the years that, to me, just has reinforced why it's so important, not only that I do it, that we get other people trained in doing the same thing. I've had to put together, it wasn't something you get in a school program, because I know what they teach in the modern naturopathic schools, and unfortunately they're taking a drift toward allopathic because it's fast and easy. You come in, talk for a few minutes, write a prescription, they're out the door. Or order a few tests, and they come back, review the test, and then give them the prescription, they're out the door. So it's real simple. You don't have to think a lot. You don't have to dig. You crank them through, get them out, and if it manages their symptoms, then everybody feels great, and that's fine. And what they don't tell you, of course, is they haven't corrected anything, and that down the road you're likely going to have a more serious problem, because the problem will go deeper into your body, and you'll be in big trouble. At any rate, I just thought I would throw this in at this point, because you hear me talk about natural medicine, and as I say, I could bring up a pile of them. I had several others that I noted, but just not enough time to get to all of them. But I hope it kind of gives you the feeling that natural medicine is something more than a novelty. So many things that we have seen that people were told was genetic, incurable, that it was terminal, that nothing could be done. And we saw them get well, but again, I say, because they kept the program. Now, if you don't keep the program, it isn't going to work. I don't know how much I can emphasize that. The symptom isn't the illness. The symptom is your body trying to deal with a disturbance that is interfering with your body working right. Okay, and we may go over homotoxicology again. We've done it at the beginning, and we throw it in occasionally. But until you really clearly understand how the body gets sick and how it gets well, if you don't understand that, nothing makes sense. You're shooting in the dark. Even doctors, if they don't understand, they're shooting in the dark. If you understand, then you can get people well. So don't forget, I haven't chosen, well, maybe I had a couple of subjects in mind for our next one, so I won't know until we send it out to you, or I'll keep you in suspense anyhow. Remember, it's mindyourhealthcast.com is our website, www.mindyourhealthcast.com. From that website, you can click on to alternativehealthandprevention.com and learn about the clinic and get health information and do research on different subjects and so forth from that website. Our broadcast is on www.freedocast.com/mindyourhealthcast. That way you can go directly to the streaming site and get on, or you can go to my website, mindyourhealthcast.com, and click directly from there to the broadcast. At any rate, we hope you tell a lot of other people about the broadcast. We've been able to keep it free up to this point. You don't have to subscribe to it. You can tune on whenever you want to. A new one goes up every week at 4 in the afternoon Sunday. Eastern Time, and it stays there 24 hours a day through Thursday night. Friday morning is taken down, and then a new one goes up Sunday again. They are available. If you missed the good ones, go to our shopping cart, and we have DVDs of the previous programs available that we've done. And we have a forum page that you can tell us what you would like, ask questions, give me criticism, comments, whatever, or disagreements, I don't care. And we'll respond to that. And we want you to register when you originally go to mindyourhealthcast.com. Not that you're going to be harassed by spams and all these tremendous offers and all that. What we will do is every week we will send you an announcement of our broadcast subject so that you'll know in advance of Sunday. We usually send it out on Friday, and you'll get an email saying here's what the broadcast is this week and kind of a synopsis of the subject. And if you really want to find out what we do or what we have available, we have some affiliate setups with some companies that will make a small percentage if you purchase through the website through our shopping cart, or go through the affiliate page and go direct to the affiliate sites. That helps us do the research and pay to put this up for no charge for everyone. And I tell you up front, we'll make a few cents on it, but some of them is pretty low, some of them like 1 or 2%, so that's not a tremendous amount of money, but a few bucks helps to keep equipment up and helps to do everything else. And we want to go to streaming from our own server one of these days soon, and when we do that, then we'll be able to archive older things on there for a while and let you at least have a chance to see one you missed. Otherwise, right now, the only way to do that is to purchase one of the DVDs, which are all listed on our shopping cart site. It was nice being with you again. We went a little over, but not too bad. So we'll be talking with you again next week at Mind Your Health Cast.